Hey, it's October 13th, 2021. I'm Todd Dunn, and today I'm here in the boat shed to put a piece of new wood in this hole. And I have the new wood here. You can see it's a nice plank with a scarf at each end, and the scarves are cut to match the hull. And I measured the gap and fit this piece of wood, and it is very close. So what I'm going to do is take this piece of wood out and plane just a little bit off the edge and hopefully get a little bit better fit. Now this plank is kiln dried wood. The wood on the boat is swelled up a bit relative to this plank. So if I have some small gaps above and below this plank, when I get it installed, I expect next summer when this boat is back in the water, this plank will swell and fill those gaps. So I'm not worried about small gaps. So what I'm going to do now is go out and just take a little bit more wood off with the hand plane. And once that's done, I will sand the edge and we'll stick it back in and see how well it fits. And once I get it so it's fitting well, it's just a little tight right now, I'm going to attach it to the boat. Okay, here's the piece of wood. I'm just going to take my trusty hand plane here and take a little wood off. Okay, first pass. I'm taking just maybe 10/1000ths off. Go the other way. A small caulking bevel into the top of this plank. Okay. So I'm going to take this inside and use my sander with 40 grit paper on it just to smooth that out a little bit, and then we'll test fit it and see if it's ready to go on the boat. Okay, I've sanded this top edge just to smooth it out a little bit after planing, and I am now ready to do a test fit here. Oh, that's much better. That goes in just the way I want it. Okay, so it's ready to go on. I just need to do a little cleanup here on the frames because I filled the screw holes with epoxy and they're a little rough. And so I'm just going to take my oscillating saw and cut off the high spots where there's a little epoxy. And then we will install the plank. Okay, I'm happy with the fit now. And I put the plank back in, and I had a little battery problem. I've marked the plank where I want to drill holes for fasteners. And I'm going to take it outside and drill those holes and countersink them, except here at the ends where the screws go through the middle of the scarf. The plank is quite thin there, and I can't put a regular countersink in at this point. So I'm just putting enough of a countersink in so that the head of the screw won't split the plank when I put it in there. I'll do that at both ends. So let's take this out and drill holes. I'm not going to show you that because I think you've seen lots of holes drilled in pieces of wood in the past. Now, off camera, I've mixed up a batch of epoxy, and this is unthickened, just straight epoxy. And what I'm going to do is paint all the scarf surfaces with this unthickened epoxy. And this is just, so this will soak into the wood a little bit and prevent epoxy from soaking into the wood after I thicken it out of the thickened epoxy and causing the joint to be epoxy starved. So there we go, that on there. And we'll put glue on here. So all the scarf joints, both on the boat and on the plank, are going to get a coat of unthickened epoxy. And irregularities in the scarf will be filled in with the thickened epoxy that goes on after this. So you won't be able to see me, but I'm going to put it on the plank as well. Okay, that's done. So now what I'm going to do is add a little bit more epoxy to this batch and thicken it up. And I'm going to use 403 microfibers. This is West System epoxy, so I'm using West System products completely, not for any reason other than I'm familiar with it and it's readily available here. Other epoxies would work fine. So let's get this thickened up. The process of thickening is pretty easy. You just add the thickening agent and stir it up. 403 microfibers are cotton microfibers. I use that because I've had very good luck with it for scarf joints, and it sands a lot easier than colloidal silica or something like that, which gives a very, very hard finish. Okay, we'll stir this up until I'm happy with it. There we go. I've got a good consistency there, and I'll just put that onto the scarf joint now with a putty knife. So we'll just take some of this and coat the scarf joint with it. And I'm going to be generous here because it's got to fill gaps, and also it's going to squeeze, any excess should squeeze out. I'll just get it on here. All right, about there. I think I got a pretty good amount on here. That should do it. Okay, at this point, I'm ready to install the plank. So here's my plank with unthickened epoxy on both ends. And we're going to set it in here. I'm going to line up my reference mark. And there we go. This is a fairly easy plank because this is a relatively flat part of the hull, and there's not a lot of twist or bend fore and aft in the plank. However, I am still going to put a reference screw in here. I'm just going to drill for these two, and we will put a couple of screws in there, not tight, but just in there to keep this plank from moving while we do the rest of the fastening. Put a couple of these, put one in all the way, and somewhere I put my driver, just using an impact driver to put these in. And there we go. Okay, these screws are into the frame, and that'll keep the plank from moving fore and aft. So I'm going to drill the rest of my fastener holes into the frames. And screw the on-hull scarf into the frame behind it. Now we're going to start fastening this guy. Now you may notice that I'm using stainless steel screws. There's a reason for that, and it is money. Now some people will say, oh, don't use stainless steel screws on a boat. They'll corrode and horrible things will happen. The boat will fall apart. Well, up here above the water line, these screws are not exposed to salt water, and they basically stay dry, and they're not really subject to crevice corrosion. I say that based on the fact that I've been using these on Tortuga for 14 years. I've removed a few of the old ones, and I found no problems with them. Okay, there we go. Now what we're going to do is snug these screws up. Now although I could tighten these screws up with the driver, I like to use a drill because an electric drill, I can set the clutch to release, and then I can gradually tighten it up a little bit to snug the screws up the way I want. So I usually work from one end of the plank to the other. Okay, I can see squeeze out. And I will probably tighten that clutch up a little and see how it goes. Give it a couple more. Okay, good. Okay, I got plenty of squeeze out there, so I'm happy with that. And we'll work our way along the plank. Now, if there was curvature in this plank, working from one end to the other would gradually draw the plank down to the hull, and which can be a bit of an issue with these short planks. Okay. Okay, we're drawing it in flush. I may have to replace this screw because it cammed out a little and it might be. Okay. Good. Good squeeze out. And I'm getting squeeze out all the way along this scarf joint. So I'm happy with that. So that plank is in, and what remains to be done is to get some of this excess epoxy off where it's squeezed out, and then set bungs. There we go. Okay, so that is what's involved in putting a plank on the hull. So the next step, as I said, is to set bungs. I've got a bunch of pre-cut bungs here that I'm going to use, and I'll use the thickened epoxy for that because for some reason my countersink and my bung cutter aren't quite the same diameter, and my experience is that the bungs are just a little bit small. So I'll use thickened epoxy to fill the gaps. Now, I can't bung the holes at the ends of the plank because I didn't countersink those deep enough to accommodate a bung, because I did not want to drill through the scarf in the plank. So just get these guys in, and there we go. And that'll set up and be fine, and we'll get this all done. So basically, you've now seen the entire procedure of repairing punky wood in the hull. And these are all above the water line, but if I had a spot below the water line, the procedure would be exactly the same. The only difference is I would be lying on my back while I did the installation, which is always a pain. So I just have 2 more bungs I can set here, and we're ready to call this job finished. Any excess thickened epoxy will just be removed when I trim the bungs. Now, one thing I do when I put bungs in with epoxy is I clean any epoxy off the end of the bung, so epoxy will not fill the slot or Phillips fitting in the screw. So that if I do have to remove these screws at some point, I don't have to dig epoxy out of the screw. Okay, a little more than I needed on this one. There we go, and a little more up there. So, 1 to go, and we're finished with this plank. Okay, that's in. So that's that. So that's the procedure. Pretty simple, starting with sounding the hull to identify problems, and then sanding off the paint to find all the fasteners, locating them, removing the bungs, backing the fasteners out, cutting the bad wood out, cutting scarfs into the hull, and cutting out new planks, cutting matching scarfs on to those in the hull into the new planks, and finally installing the new planks after fitting them. So, simple procedure. When I was younger, I used to do the whole process for a plank like this in an afternoon. Now I take my time and stretch it out over a number of days, just because. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed seeing this process and seeing me plug up the final hole in Tortuga's hull. I'm just going to pan the camera over and show you the other holes in the hull that I've already glued up. Now, up here near the bow, you can see where I've already glued up the 2 new planks up here. The screw holes in the hull above and below that plank are where I set a new sister frame in, because the old frame was in horrible condition. And Then we go back, and here's the repair back here. So what remains to be done on these is to set the rest of the bungs. I think I have about 20 to go. And I'm also going to trim off the bungs I set in the other day. And then I will be fairing the planks into the hull by a longboard sanding them. And when that's done, we will paint the new planks after I caulk them, of course. So here we go. Repairs done to Tortuga's top sides. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this today. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't, why don't you consider subscribing to my channel and clicking that notification bell so you'll get notifications of upcoming videos. I will be videoing some of the fairing process and when I put the first coat of paint on the new wood to hopefully make these repairs essentially disappear. Now, I plan to get 3 coats of paint on the new wood this fall so that I will have a good substrate of paint on the new wood next spring when I paint the full top sides. Okay, thanks for watching.